Awesome. On to episode 5. So, Cardston, family in Cardston. So, Dad, when did you decide to move to Cardston? Why?
I think 1 year after the high school moved out of Glenwood, I stayed on to teach at the junior high, but my heart really was with the high school. And then I had to commute to Cardston, and it was 27 miles to commute each time, and it took, so there's an hour out of the day that I would rob my family of being around them. And
But you were going to go into coaching, and you'd have to coach.
Yeah,
and
and
then
I
back and forth to
coach, and
coach
so
in
it takes-
tournaments, and it was just leaving
Yeah.
me alone.
And at this point, you were still just renting from Mel and Jean, right? You didn't
Yes.
own a home yet.
yes, and then I think the straw that broke the camel's back is one time Mom went over to get the mail at the post office, and she heard the postmaster talking to this other a lady that had come in, and she heard him say, "That Blaine Bunnage doesn't know enough to teach my kid."
Oh,
And that was the straw that broke the camel's back right there. And, and oddly enough, the kid that he was talking about was Tom Workman. And Tom and I have a friendship that's lasted right through. I coached him
Yeah.
ball, played softball with him or whatever. But that probably is that single incident, I think, has shaped Mom's opinion of Hillspring more than anything else. There's other things, of course, but the small-mindedness of
when
people.
you say Mom, you meant Sheila.
Yeah.
I thought you meant Grandma Faye.
No.
I would have thought Grandma Faye would have said something.
Oh, yeah, probably
Yeah,
would.
she would have.
But Sheila didn't say
I
anything.
came home crying,
Yeah, she just was really upset.
and I heard Blaine say later in his life, he said, Sheila, he was absolutely right. I didn't know anything.
Tom was not sharp in school.
He didn't. I didn't know enough to teach that.
Anyway, so we made the decision to move in.
And so what, did that job opening come up? Is that how you got it?
Yes. Doug Alston had moved in, and he had taught the social studies. And so he went on to the Lethbridge Junior College to be administrator there. And so it left the social studies opening. And so I called Grant Mackin again and asked if I could transfer in. And it wasn't as quick a decision this time because the grade 12 results from that year before were not strong. I think our valedictorian had an average of about 65%.
Oh.
It was not a strong class, and I think I got judged on that. But then he called me and said, "Yeah, we'd like you to come in." So,
Wow. So, now talk about Jody. When did you start thinking about Jody?
that's quite a
was my
story.
decision.
That's quite a story. I got to relay that one, honey. Mom and I went to Sheila and I went to a movie, and during the course of this movie, the wife comes up to her husband and she says, "You'll never believe this, but I'm pregnant." And he, "Oh, well, big surprise, And I
Only in the
scoffed.
movies.
I scoffed when on the ride home. I said, "That'd be the day I wouldn't know that my wife was pregnant," because there's so many accompanying mood swings and heartburn and that kind of thing.
Yeah.
And so right then she plotted. And so anyway, she plotted to get pregnant and did that, unbeknownst to me. And one morning, we were sitting having scriptures and having breakfast, and Janelle Cameron called, which she did a lot in the morning, right when we're still there, right interrupting, our family breakfast. And so I said to her, as I left for school, I said, "Why don't you call Janelle and just ask her if she'll call at a different time, because it just interrupts everything." And she just was quite mad at me, thinking that she should have to go do that. And so we started to have an argument, and it turned out to be a big argument. So there was a silent treatment going on. Well, I came home from school that night, and I tried to make amends, so I went into her. I said, honey, if you'd just tell me what I've done wrong. I mean, I can't understand that you're making such a big thing of this. And she turned to me and she says, did you ever stop and think I might be pregnant?
Wow.
That's how I found out that she was pregnant with Jody. I have never forgiven her for that.
Wow.
I was, 3 months?
Sure showed him.
Oh yeah, heavens! She was 3 months
along.
along. She wanted to show me that what I had said in that movies wasn't true. You couldn't always tell, and so
It sounds like you were onto something, though. You should have thrown that back at her for the next 20 years every time she got into an argument. You didn't understand it. You should have said, are you pregnant? I'm trying to stop and think why you would say this.
that would
One
be
time you told me.
that would be deserving.
So I understand Jody's birth interrupted a basketball tournament. Let's talk about that.
Well, yes, and here's the interesting part about it is because Mom had been, to my recollection, it was 31 hours with Todd, 19 hours in labor with Derry, and the Jody came along, and she right during the regional basketball playoffs for the right to be able to go to Salt Lake City to
Men's league?
no, this was church men's.
So even worse.
Yeah.
Church.
So it was a big deal.
Yeah.
And it was the regional basketball championships.
Yeah.
And so guess what? She starts to have labor pains. Well, she's going along with the labor pains, and I said, well, honey, it looks, because I knew that it should be quite a while. And so I said, I'm going to run downtown. Got her tucked into bed and everything in the hospital. I'm going to run downtown and get you some flowers and contact Mom and people and let them know that the days are accomplished, that she's coming.
Let me just interrupt here for a second. Okay. You know, with my first 2 pregnancies, I didn't care about weight, so I gained a lot I think I weighed about 185 pounds when Derry was born. So I'd gained a lot of weight with my other 2 kids. But with the next 2 kids, I was more into thinking smarter. And so I only gained, I think, about 11 pounds with Jody. I just kind of starved myself. I was...
She was your borscht baby?
Honestly, I kept fit. I walked, and then I was eating less and less. I think I only gained about 11 or 15 pounds at the most when Derry went. So I was fit, way better to have a baby than I was with Derry or Todd. So anyway.
Okay, so I go downtown and get her some flowers. I go up and I called some Mom and Sheila's mom and dad, and then I went back up to the hospital and went into the room to give her the flowers. She's not there, and I said, and Vi Matkin just happened to walk by. I said, "Where's my wife?" And she says, "Congratulations, Papa, you're the proud father of a new baby girl." Oh. I said, "What?" She was 5 hours from the time she started labor to the time that Jody was...
Were you mad that Dad wasn't there?
No,
I was just happy to have it over with. I didn't care.
So meanwhile, the basketball tournament is started. This is on Saturday. The basketball tournament's starting. I think I played Friday night, didn't I, honey? And then the days were coming on the next one. And so she said, "Aren't you supposed to be at a basketball tournament?" I said, "I can't go to the basketball tournament. I got a brand new baby daughter here and you in the hospital." And she says, "Honey, I am fine. You go." So
what?
Yes. So I did. And
wow.
And we won. We won the regional championship for the right to go to Salt Lake.
How many points you score?
Well, I was the most valuable player in the tournament, so
I did triple-double?
I did pretty good. I don't know.
I should have got the triple-double.
You definitely should have. There is no woman listening to this right now that's not thinking, what? You told him to go? No, you're not selfish. The fact that Mom was selfless enough to say go, like... Oh, man, I think that would be grounds for divorce if I even brought the idea up to my wife. But I wonder if that was the key. I wonder if the key was he told you he wasn't going to go, and you decided.
Yeah.
I wonder
Yeah.
if you'd have been upset if he said, "Honey, I have to go. I'm going to be the MVP."
Yeah.
You probably would have been mad.
Yeah, probably.
You're going to leave me here in the hospital, but since it was your idea,
Yeah.
wow, that's awesome. So, what's your favorite memories of Jody as a kid, as a baby?
You know what?
Was she blonde? Did she have a lot of hair?
No, none of our kids had a lot of hair.
Well, she had a lot of hair, but it was right white.
Yeah, you couldn't.
You couldn't tell that she had
Both
a lot
her
of
and
hair.
Derry were.
But she was the most contented baby, and I didn't have to share her with Grandma Faye or Grandma Margaret.
Because you're in Cardston now.
I'm in Cardston, and I had her total attention. And I never could say, run down to Grandma's because, I need a break. It was, and so she cuddled with me. She was, and I don't think I read a lot I might have done with Todd, but I don't think I was a real reader. But I remember with Jody and with you, I would tuck you in and read. And that, I think Jody was the biggest one. The memory that I have is that I always tucked her in and read to her. But she was the one that, and even when mom or Grandma Faye would come in, she would mostly want to be on my lap. It was, I had her full attention, not the other. I mean, she'd go to them if they coaxed her, whatever, but she was mine totally.
Now, what year did Grandma and Grandpa LeVar move to Cardston?
I'm not sure. You'll have to look it up in the book.
So, yeah, I don't want to forget about this part. So when you guys moved to Cardston, where was the first house? The one by Grandma Shipley?
No, it was up. It was
See,
a
I
block
live in-
east of where we are right now, where we live right now.
What?
The Federal Grain House. It's the one that, where if you go a block east of us, there's a corner house right there, and then there's an old house that's been refurbed.
Like where Phil Merrill was?
Yeah, it's just right next to where Phil.
Where Sheridan Smith?
Yeah,
I don't
Sonia-
remember. You know
so-
where Scott is? Scott Murray
Yeah,
lives.
yeah.
Okay, across the street, the second house.
yeah, it was.
Yeah, that was where Sonia Merrill and Sheridan Smith, I think, lived there for a bit. But anyway, it's right next
Oh,
to
did
Phil
they?
Merrill's house.
Yeah.
That was the house
Yep.
you moved to. Is it
Yep.
the same house?
Yeah, it was called the
Yes.
Federal Grain House because it was
What?
the
How did I grow up a block from there and know exactly what house you're talking about? Had no idea you used to live there.
I don't know.
So how long did you live there?
I don't know. We
couple of years anyway.
Did you rent it or own it?
And rented.
Oh, okay.
Rented.
You rented.
it only had 2 bedrooms, and they were tiny. So you and
So Todd would remember it, but no one else would.
yeah, Todd and Derry had bunk beds.
I wasn't alive.
Todd and Derry had bunk beds, and then we had a bedroom, and that was about.
And was that the house you were in when Jody was born?
No, we were in the White House, weren't we?
Yeah, we were in the White House when Jody
Okay, so was
born.
Derry
No, no.
would have been at
Just a sec.
No, the Ellsworth Workman House. That was where Jody was born. The Workman House across from Paul and Eva and next to Merlin Brown.
Oh, right.
by Grandma Shipley.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
No, that was the first.
That's
house
where you were born.
That's
Both.
the first house you purchased.
That's right. That's
Okay.
right.
So was Derry was 3 when Jody was born?
She was a little
No,
older
she was
than
older
that.
than that. She was nearly 5.
Oh, really?
Yeah, I needed a respite
She
from
was
those.
4. She was 4. She was coming 5.
Okay.
I needed a respite. I needed 2 kids, and then I needed a respite for a while.
yeah.
I didn't have grandma and grandma. Yeah, I didn't have the grandmas
So,
to help me, so I in town.
Was Derry when Derry was a little kid? Was she rough and tumble, or was she a princess?
No,
She liked to play with dolls and dress
Derry
up
or
dolls?
Jody?
Derry.
no. Derry was more outdoorsy. She
Well, she liked to play.
She
with
liked to
dolls,
play.
and
Every
her and
little
Kim-
girl that
Her and Kim were.
yeah, they played with dolls and stuff, but every little girl at that age did. But
That's what I meant. Was she so excited to have a little baby sister to
Oh yes.
dress and so how was she with Jody?
Oh, both Todd and Derry were just excellent with Jody.
and Jody was she was tiny,
She was
so
a sweet little baby and so pretty when she was born too. But the thing,
and so content. I don't ever remember having a colicky, non-sleeper. Jody was just that.
Were any of your kids that way though?
Todd was really a cry baby.
I think Todd probably
Todd
more
was the
than anyone
worst.
else.
Yeah,
any
the
others
baby.
were that
But
way.
Jody was. I mean, she almost slept through the night as soon as I brought her home from the hospital. She was.
But she was the only child that I couldn't discipline.
Really?
Really. I mean, as soon as if I'd raise my voice to her, she'd just tear up and
Big tears
just
rolling down
look at
her.
that little look on her face and melt my heart.
And you know what? You couldn't raise your voice around her either. She was kind of this, like Marley. As soon as there was contention or loud voices, she did not like it at all.
Yeah, she was a sweet little girl. Well, so was Derry. So,
But she was very passive. You know, she did not. Things contented her. Like you could put something in the middle of the floor and she'd be there for hours playing with it, or she'd get in a tussle with one of the kids and she'd let them
Do you
have their
think
way.
she kind of had Grandma Harker's temperament? Grandma
Lishman's?
Margaret's?
Yeah, I do.
Yeah.
I think about that now. Yeah,
and
'cause
and
at the
as she grew up, did she ever love to be in the camera spotlight?
Yeah, of your 8mm.
Yes. After the initial blinding of my spotlight.
Yeah. That's so funny. So I want to go back to that. So when you brought her home from the hospital, was Grandma Faye living in Cardston when Jody was born?
I don't know. Was she Blaine?
The reason I ask is I wondered, was she at the hospital?
Who, my mom?
No, Grandma Faye.
No.
No, it was just
I had that baby all by myself. There was nobody there.
yeah, and
No
it just
Blaine, no
so quick. It
no
just
baby, nothing.
So they were still in Hill Spring. That's why.
Yeah.
I think.
Yeah.
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 And so when you brought her home from, do you remember Derry seeing Jody for the first time? And
Oh yeah, kids loved their little sister.
yeah, and Todd was good with her too.
Oh yeah.
How old was Todd at this time now? 7?
Todd was born in '64 and '70. He was
almost
8. He was 8.
Yeah.
No,
Just
coming
about
8.
to turn
Coming
8.
8.
Yeah, he was 7.
Yeah.
And so now that house that you moved into the first time, was it just 2 bedrooms?
No,
but-
4-bedroom.
But we built those bedrooms in the basement. didn't
We finished the basement off, and there were 2 bedrooms
okay.
downstairs, and so we had upstairs. Who
There
did
are
we
2
have
bedrooms.
upstairs?
We had the baby, and then Brandon or Joe, Derry, and Todd had those 2
Each
bedrooms.
of the bottom ones.
Had the bottom ones.
Then
and
when
the
Brandon
best-
came along, we put Brandon up top, and Jody and Derry shared the.
Yeah.
That's when I fixed that little.
Yeah.
Vanity and water.
Yeah, tell me about the fence in that backyard.
The fence.
The painting of that fence.
Oh yeah, tell them about it, Blaine.
That's just Grandma Shipley. That's just one of my favorite stories about that fence.
We built this fence.
Well, somebody had torn the fence down, was tearing a fence down, and they said we could have it because we didn't just do it from scratch.
No.
And so we went and got the fence, and then I proceeded to paint my side of the fence. And of course, Luella Shipley, she's out there like a spy, wanting.
She was a good neighbor to me, though, Blaine.
Looking
Holy
at
cow.
it and everything, and then she says, when she got finished, she looked at it and she says, "My, that looks really nice." I said, "Well, thank you." She says, "You know what? If you'll paint my side, I'll buy the paint." I said, "Hey, there's an idea." So I ended up painting the.
You and Todd.
Yeah.
Now,
Honestly, you can say all you want about Sister Shipley, but she loved me. She made a quilt for every one of my kids.
we called her Grandma Shipley.
Yeah.
Yep. She brought dinner over. She brought buns over.
I mean, if you didn't know her, she was a tire biter.
Everybody in the neighborhood and everybody around and everybody in the town knew Mrs. Shipley to be the Mrs. Grinch of the city. But honestly, she was the best,
she was
best
a good neighbor.
neighbor to me.
And her
She was
husband,
so good.
Archie, was just kind of like a post.
Yeah.
Didn't say much, didn't do much, and she was pretty domineering over
I
over
loved
him.
Grandma Shipley. She was excellent.
And did you have a dog at that point?
Yes. We had a dog in Hill Spring. Was that me?
It's your grandson calling.
Who is it?
Ryan.
Hello. Oh, my goodness. Look at those cute little girls. Hi, sweetheart.
Yeah.
You planned Jody.
Sorry for the unexpected pause there. We had Ryan called
Yeah.
to say hi, so. Okay, so Jody, so do you remember did you have to spend much time disciplining Jody?
No.
No. She pretty much did what you said, and
So you said that with Jody, you just had to raise your voice a little bit, and she'd start to get upset and to cry. But what about Todd? How did you discipline Todd?
you
How
were
did we
pretty.
discipline him?
You were pretty stern with Todd. You were.
Yeah, I was.
You were. It was your first child. It was going to be perfect. You were going to make sure that.
Yeah,
Everybody-
Poor Todd probably experienced my wrath more than anybody else. And not that he was a bad kid, because he was good. He would get into mischief. He was his mother's
this recording?
child.
Yep.
Interesting when I think back what you said about Jody and that we've been talking about it. I think she has more Harker blood in her than I've ever gave it thought, because
Yeah.
that's exactly how the Harkers were. Peacemakers, quiet, just weren't they? You
Now,
know,
what
you
about
think-
Derry though? How did you discipline her? Like, would she cry if you raised your voice at her?
No, she
I
would.
don't remember.
She would pout
I don't remember having to discipline
very much.
kids
no.
when they were younger.
But
It was
Jerry
when they
was-
became teenagers, and that was a little different situation because,
Derry would become quiet.
yeah,
She'd become quiet, and then she'd be quiet, and I don't know if you'd call it pouting, but she'd just go to a room and sulk, or she.
So Jody sounds like she was a lot like Grandma Margaret, and Derry sounds like she was a lot like you.
Yeah.
When Mom's upset, does she just get quiet and withdraw? That's the fights that
used
I
to.
recognized when I was a kid growing
I
up.
do.
I used to be like that.
I don't remember you guys yelling at each other. I don't remember fighting in the home. I just remember distance. Suddenly it'd be awfully quiet, and Mom would be in the bedroom, the door closed, and I'd say, "What's going on?" "Oh, she's upset with me." And that would be about the end of it. But I did want to, we forgot to mention the story. I want you to tell the story about being locked in the camper. Because do you remember what the fight, yeah, just tell the story, what the fight was about and what happened.
Wasn't that the same time, honey, with about the Janelle?
No, it was we were.
No, because I was born
No,
when
Oh,
that
were you?
happened.
Oh,
you
okay.
were you.
Oh yeah, we were at the White House.
Yeah,
when
we
that
were
occurred.
Weren't we in at
Locked in the trailer? I thought it was across from the church. I thought that was the camper right out back.
No, it was at the
No,
White
no.
House.
Oh,
No.
okay.
Truck and camper.
No, the camper was on the truck.
Yeah.
And it seems to me, now correct me if I'm wrong, but it seems to me like we had gone into 4A playoffs, and Derry went in. We told her she could go in, and she sat with a bunch of her friends who were all boys, and they sat up in the bleachers and were not watching a ball game. They were just, and I was thinking flirting and not watching anything, just being. They weren't being obnoxious or anything,
Yeah,
but.
move the mic a little closer to your face, Mom.
So anyway, I was mad that Derry was just there not watching a game and just being over in a corner and I can still see her, see them over where it goes round. It wasn't, anyway, they were just laughing and giggling and I thought that was rude for her to be over there with all these boys, and I don't remember much girls there. But anyway, I was mad, and so I wanted you to discipline her for it, and we had a big fight. And I, that night when we come home, and it was really crazy because, wasn't that when it was? Anyway, you got up and I said, well, why don't you go sleep in the camper? So you said, all right. So you went out there, and I was so ticked. I kept laying there thinking, okay, now if I go shut that end gate up, he's going to stay there.
Oh, now it makes sense.
He's going to have to stay
It
in
was
there.
the caveman camper, so it was an 8-foot.
Yeah.
So
I didn't understand how you could get locked inside of a camper.
Yeah.
So I thought to myself, if I go shut that end gate, and this is about 2 a.m, if I go shut that end gate, he's going to have to stay out in that truck till I decide it's time for him to come out.
So, what is that? How you remember it, Dad?
There's a sliding camper window. It was pretty easy to get through that and into the cab and get out. But
Do you remember that happening?
oh yeah,
And
that's why I say, Mom and I have a wonderful marriage, but this hasn't been the fact that we didn't have a few arguments. Both of us were kind of bullheaded, and
that's funny. And so, when we were talking about a little bit when Jody first got home, Derry was like the older sister who does she like to dress with her and play her and
oh yeah,
Oh, yeah. Derry was really a mother over her.
That's great.
She mothered and smothered her.
Did Todd and Derry fight over who got
No.
to?
no,
Not really.
The kids are pretty good to each other.
And so did Todd. Did Todd take piano lessons?
Oh, yeah.
Yes.
And you forced him to practice his piano?
Yes, we did, and he had to practice it every single morning. And the piano was in the White House, was right below us, and so we'd hear him faithfully practicing each morning. We were pretty happy with that. Later on, we found that he just turned the tape recorder on and taped his practice, and then from then on, he'd just turn the tape recorder on, so the music was playing. Then he'd turn the TV on, and watch cartoons.
Wow. So what year was it that you moved from the Grandma Shipley house?
The house by Grandma Shipley,
Yeah, that's what I meant. Yeah.
1977.
Okay, that's why I don't remember that house at all. That was
Yeah,
foreign.
well, you took your first steps in the workman house.
Yeah. So let's go back then. So did Jody and Derry and Todd all take piano lessons at the same time? Like were they all in lessons at the same time?
Yeah. They all took piano lessons.
And so
the same time.
did Derry practice faithfully?
Derry, yeah, she was pretty good. She was.
Not like Jody. Jody was. We never even had to say, "Go practice your piano." She was faithful.
Do you think that's because she liked it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
But I found that if you wanted to have your kids really practice the piano and do well, you sat there with them. And I tried that a few times too, and I did that a lot
But
with
not.
Derry.
We weren't consistent enough to
No.
do that. We didn't need to do it with Jody, but we needed to do it with Derry and Todd
Yeah.
and you.
Yeah. Now, do you remember anything else about Jody when she was a little baby that you remember that was special, like Derry's smile and Jody's just her temperament?
Oh yeah, she was a delight. Of course, the thing I remember most about Jody was cutting her leg open, and that was what it broke my heart, to see that little girl with her.
Yeah, tell that story.
Well, it was a Sunday afternoon, and we had a television in the bedroom, and Todd was in the bedroom, in our bedroom watching the TV, and he says, "Dad, the golf's on," and so I went running in to see what was going on, and I sat on the bed watching this. Well, Jody was just, what, honey, 3 years old, maybe 2.5, 3 years old.
Yeah, I don't
And
think she was quite
so she
three.
she came in to watch to see what was going on, and I lifted her up with me on the bed, and I'm just sitting on the bed, of course, and of course that when she saw it was golf, I guess she wasn't too interested in that, so she went to crawl off.
And mind you, she had a red dress on and white leotards.
Yeah,
I
and
know.
I was peeling a squash when Todd asked me to come. So I still had the knife in my hand, and Jody went to crawl off, and we had an end board on the bed, and so between the mattress and the end board there was like this, and she went to slip off. She slipped down into that, and then went to take a tumble. So I went and grabbed her, not realizing I had the knife in my hand, and she started to cry really hard, and so I picked her up and babied her, and she just kept crying really hard, and so I set her down and says, go see Mom, maybe make her feel better, you know. Well, she took one step and fell flat on her face, and her whole back of her leg was just a mass of blood. And then I could see what I had done, and Mom wouldn't go to the hospital. She just says, you take her. So I took her to the hospital, and I don't remember how many stitches, but they had to do a lot of stitching in that little leg and so we've got pictures of her birthday party when she's got this leg all bandaged up, but I guess that's the worst I ever felt with what I did to one of my kids, you know.
Yeah, it was just an accident, though, obviously. So how about me? Was I planned?
Oh, yeah.
Yep.
We wanted one more.
And then the same distance between you and Jody as between Jody and Derry.
Yep.
So we spaced our kids out, and there's a reason for that, I think, because Mom really didn't have the patience to be able to endure tons of little babies at the same time.
You remember I was doing it all by myself. You were gone.
Yep.
And so no, we planned you, and I can't remember the circumstances around when Mom told me that she was expecting, but I think that the earlier debacle with Jody's pregnancy, that we worked together and made sure that we checked it and made
now,
sure.
you'd never touched on this. Where did Jody Ray come from? The name?
I think
Jody. Because Jody Foster.
Jody Foster, that's right.
You named your daughter after Jody Foster?
not the movie star Jody. There's
okay.
Foster's moved into town, and he coached the basketball team, and I coached the junior varsity team. And he was there, and they had a daughter that they called Jody.
Oh,
so that kind of put the name in it. We kind of liked that name, and so, but we didn't like Jody. We liked Jody, and we just felt like.
Well, we were really,
significance
really,
to
really
Ray.
good friends with Kendon and Ray Eckett too, at
that's
the
true.
time, and we loved them, and so that just went together. They were at our place constantly, Kendon and Ray Eckett, and so we liked that mix of names, and so that's how she got it.
I think you should stick with Jodie Foster, the actress. It's way funnier. She named after Jodie Foster. All right. Well, so what was your favorite memory of me when I was young?
Okay, this is a pretty easy one. We were
right.
really, really good with friends with Don and Cheryl. And they had a little girl named Cindy, and you and Cindy, and our backyards touched each other. You and Cindy were inseparable. You were either over to her place or she was over to our place. We had a trampoline. She was on the trampoline with you constantly. You ran through the sprinklers together. You stole carrots out of the garden together. You did everything. But when you were, I think it was probably about, 4 or 5, you came into my bedroom, and it was in the White House, and I had a bathroom off of that bedroom. And you had gone in there, and you were looking through the mirror, and you found this Nivea cream in there. For some reason, you took the lid off the Nivea cream, and you were putting some on her, and she was putting some on you, and some got on the mirror. Some of this Nivea cream got on the mirror. So then you tried to wipe it off so you wouldn't get into trouble. And so you were trying to wipe it off, and then she was trying to wipe it off, and there was Nivea cream all over you,
Well, the
all
makeup
over
too,
her,
honey.
all over yes, and makeup too.
Oh yeah.
And all
I remember
over,
that video.
yeah.
seen
But
that
you
video.
had dark eyes, lipstick on her, and then this Nivea cream. And when I went in there, you both were silent.
Yeah.
Absolutely silent, never said a word because you got trapped. And then I started to laugh my head off because it was so funny because you'd put lipstick on her and these dark eyelashes and whatever, and then you had all this Nivea all over the mirror, and honestly it
You
was
laughed about it?
first I walked in there and I thought, you little brats, and then I started to laugh because you both looked so scared to death, like you're going to get beat. And then I started to laugh, and then you guys looked at each other and started to laugh. So the three of us had a great laugh about it. But that was one of my best memories of you when you were little.
You took your first steps when we were in the workman house. So I remember you taking your first steps there. We had the dog Jojo. Then we had her right from the time we were in Hill Spring, and you played with the dog a lot. You were a happy baby. Not as happy as Derry. Derry was probably the happiest.
But
I would think.
you were planned, and you were the boy we wanted. We had 2 girls, and we had this older, so we wanted one more boy, and we got this.
We had the bookends.
Yeah. Is that, if you'd have had another daughter, do you think you would have considered having another kid?
I don't think so, unless Dad coaxed hard. But I don't think so.
We just felt like that's all Mom could handle, that many
Yeah.
kids in our family, and so we
could have handled a lot more.
I
if
think we
Dad
were
would
quite
have been home
content to end
24
it at
hours
4.
or on the weekends. But
Yeah.
I never saw him. So anyway,
So how old was Todd when I was born? 14?
Well, he was 64 and you were 76. He was 12.
Oh, okay. So was he excited to have a little brother?
Yeah. Oh, Todd was really good. All the kids were good.
but
with
you know what? It's so funny because the kids picked on Brandon Brandon a lot, and they'd expect him to do things that he wasn't capable of doing at the age he was, and so I'd always say, "You kids, this little guy's only 3. He's only 2. He's only 5."
He's only 17.
But they did. They picked on him
They
and had him
expected a
crying
lot of
quite
him,
a
yeah, I
bit. And
think.
so I would try to say, "Oh, you kids, he's only 3." Can you remember me saying that?
Oh, yeah.
And then I remember in that White House, we had a French door that opened onto nothing. It went right
Yep.
out to the ground. And
How high would that have been?
Well, a story. So it would have been eight.
No, because our basement was out of the ground quite a bit. So it wasn't 8 feet down there. It was, from our deck.
8 or 10 feet.
Didn't matter. Didn't
6
matter
to
how
8
big
feet.
the windows were, honey. The floor is. I'm talking
Anyway,
about the second floor.
you were bashed. Somehow you got bashed in the head with a truck. That the kids.
No.
You're misremembering now.
He fell first. He fell first and had the gash.
Okay.
And
For
then
some reason, they opened the patio doors and we weren't home.
Yeah, where were you guys?
we were gallivanting someplace.
We were
But I know
my
that we were
kids,
on our way to Calgary for the second time when Jody shoved the truck at Brandon and it opened it back up again, was it? Or was
Yeah.
the first time?
I don't remember, but anyway, the gash was opened again. We still got that really bad.
Oh yeah.
So
Well, I have a calcification on my forehead. You can feel where the bone is. Must have cracked my forehead a little
Yeah,
bit.
well, you took a pretty good fall down there. And see, what had happened is I put the patio doors in there, and the deck was just a small deck out going to the back door. And so I still had to build the deck at the back. And that just hadn't been done yet. And that's
But
when
the concrete was poured?
no, there was no concrete under it. It was just
What would I hit my head on?
a board probably from the steps. The
Yeah, I
steps
think
going
so.
up because it was just ground. There was no grass.
I
It was
think
just
I think
dirt
you
ground.
fell on the step and then down. I think that kind of broke your fall, but it gashed you open.
But when I start looking back at things, I cannot believe how we left our kids alone at such a young age to babysit. Like,
You're very responsible. we felt.
yes, like we'd go to Calgary and leave you guys alone. And well, Margaret and Lauren Pitcher lived next door, and we were really, really good neighbors. And we're back and forth constantly. And so if any time I was gone, the kids knew they could go to Margaret and Lauren's. But I do remember that I do remember that we left you kids at when did we go? We went someplace and left them, and they were really young, and they cooked their own meals. Like I'm saying 11, 12,
Yeah.
Todd was. And then Derry would cook the meals, and we'd be gone for 2 or 3 days and leave you kids all by ourselves. when you were when they were younger, when you were younger.
So when I came back from the hospital and you guys brought me home, who was most excited to see me? Who was most excited to have a little brother?
Wow, I don't know.
Well,
I
that's-
think all of them.
You know, they're all excited for the first 3 or 4 days, and then it kind of wears off.
yeah.
And then
course.
Jody, of course, became your
There was-
second mother.
There was no companionship that lasted from childbirth to now better than yours and Jody's. You'd think you were twins because you loved to be together when you were 2 years old, and you love to be together now, and it was a constant bond. And I think you shared a bed. You remember in the White House, you had a bed and she had a bed. They were twin beds, but we
They
separated
weren't
them.
supposed to share a bed.
No, but
they did.
I would say Jody loved to read to you at night, and she'd cross over and read to you. And several times I'd say, "Okay, lights out, done." So I'd turn the light off, and this one night I could hear this little noise in there, and I went in there, and Jody had the flashlight. She had the blankets up over your heads, and she'd got back into bed with you and was reading with you with the flashlight on.
I can't imagine being mad at that as a parent. You know what I mean?
Well, you
what
know
I'd
what?
give to have kids
We were-
that would read books, number one, and number two, read books to their younger sibling to be kind.
Well, what was
they-
really
you kids
funny
were
is
good.
we would be stern with you, but then we'd shut the door and laugh our heads off,
Yeah,
you know? But
yeah. So when did you guys decide to move out of the house beside Shipley's?
well, our family grew.
It
Our
was
family,
4 bedrooms, right?
Didn't Gib Schaefer call us then too?
yeah, I think so. But just a sec, we had 1, 2,
Schaefer
3
Realty.
bedrooms upstairs. We only had 1 bedroom downstairs. We had
What's that, honey?
in that White House. We only had 1 big bedroom downstairs.
Oh
Brandon.
no, you guys are talking about the wrong house. I'm still talking
the
about
Workman House.
yeah. Oh. So you decided you needed to move from there
We just
to
needed to more
the brick.
the White House.
Yeah, the White House with the brick.
white stucco house.
Yeah.
Whose
Whose house
we
was
needed
it?
more room.
Chris Lee's. He was an RCMP officer,
Yeah.
and I think that Gib had called me, or Jim Schaefer had called me and said that this house was coming available. Would you be interested? And so, well, I think I need to say that we paid $9,600 for that Workman house, fixed it up, and sold it for $45,000. I think
Whoa.
it was. And then we moved,
45,000?
yeah.
Wow.
Then we moved to the White House.
How long did you own it?
Well, let's see. It'd be from the time that Jody.
Blaine, we only paid 24 for that White House, so we wouldn't have gotten that much for that Workman House.
No. We paid 57. 57 for the White House, and then 93 for the house we're in now.
Wow. But that's a crazy return on your money. So you spent $9,600 and lived in it for 5 years?
Yeah, but let's see. Jody was born there, and you were born there, so we'd have to. I think we bought it in about 1970 or 71.
We loved the neighbors. When
Yeah, but
when-
you made, $40,000 or
Yeah, at that time it was really good.
Yeah, that's
we
great
put
return.
But we put it right back into another house that was more expensive.
Yep.
So, so then it didn't have anything done in the basement, and so we had engineered with Chris Lee, who was going to be gone for the Labor Day weekend, Labor Day or Victoria Day weekend. I think it was Victoria Day, and so we had already made the deal with him, and we asked him. Our possession date though wasn't until the end of the month.
Yep.
That month or the middle of the month or something, and we just asked him if he minded if we went in, because the Levitts were close to us and
Yep.
helped us with all our houses, and if we could go in and kind of frame up the basement. So he said, sure, go right ahead. So we went in there and we framed up the whole basement and got things going on that, and that was when Mom was down at the other house, of course, and so she cooked our meal and brought it up, and we forgot to bring utensils or something, and she was having a fit. And we said, "Would you use Lee's? You know, it's right there." "Oh, we can't do that. What if they came? What if they came home?" And da. And she was just a stewing about it. Well, Daryl goes out and he gets one of Chris's uniforms,
No, just his
the
hat.
tunic,
He just had his hat on. His
RCMP hat,
RCMP hat.
RCMP hat, and he sits right close at a Judas eye in the door.
Yeah.
And so he rings the doorbell, and I of course I knew what he was doing, so I said, "Honey, can you get that? I'm busy." So she goes down at the bottom of the stairs and looks through the Judas eye, and here's this stern guy with an RCMP hat on, and she just about fainted. Well, we laughed and laughed and laughed at that, but we had a good time.
Oh, that's funny. So I remember mowing the lawn in that house with the brick door, thinking the yard was huge.
It was.
It was even by today's
Wasn't
standards.
some
It was
wasn't
just
so
long.
huge wide. It was long.
Long. It was really.
Yeah.
It was almost like because we had a garden back there too. Huh?
Yeah.
Yeah, it met Dawn and Cheryl's.
Yeah. And
Lot.
and the Summerfelts were right next to them, right?
Yeah.
Leslie.
Aaron.
Can you remember the cellar we had back there? Did you put that in your book? Our date in the cellar with Dawn and Cheryl?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
So Summerfelts lived in that house, and then they must have sold it and moved right up the street, right? Because as I said that, remembering it was or was it a different Summerfelt?
Different Summerfeld. Glenn,
that's why.
Glenn and
Yeah,
Jeanette lived two Pitchers, and then Summerfelds were on the other side of them.
Yep. And then straight behind us isn't what Russell's there?
Yep.
Keith and Marley.
Because
Keith
that's
and
where you
Janet?
got. That's where you got the golf ball, was it, or was it Todd? No, or the BB gun.
I think it was always Todd.
I think it was the.
I think
with
Todd did the golf
I
ball.
think.
Todd did the.
What
Oh,
did he
May,
do?
no, you did the BB
I did
gun.
the BB gun. What did Todd do with a golf ball? What's that story?
Well, I was thinking that was the golf ball, but it was the BB gun, wasn't it? Well, you also.
No, but I think Todd hit the ball and hit the back, a golf ball and hit the back of Janet and Keith's window. We
think
had to
so.
pay for that one. And then we got Brandon.
Well, it must have been Todd that shot the window, made the little hole in the window in the workman house then, because he was shooting a dead bird like this, and it hit the sidewalk and then caromed up.
Oh, yeah, that one wasn't me.
And no, because you're too young, so it must have been Todd that did that.
Wow. And so when did you guys get the trampoline?
When we moved to the White House.
I would say we must have got that in about 78.
We bought it when Dale bought that business. We
round
bought it from Dale.
trampoline.
Round trampoline.
Do you remember how much they were?
I don't remember.
Don't.
I just was wondering if it was a luxury back then.
But you remember jumping on it with
Oh,
Cindy?
for sure.
Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, and Todd was really good at it. And
Yep.
He helped.
But you moved positions. It used to be up by the house.
Well, we built a garage.
Then we built a garage, and so we moved it back
so
there.
that's-
Oh, I didn't realize you'd built that garage. I just thought it was always there.
No. Remember the trampoline was there to start with, and Todd
I
doing
don't.
all those somersaults on it.
Yeah. What year did you build the garage?
What? Mom died in
how the heck would you know?
82. So it was before that. I would say about 1980. 79,
That's why I don't remember, yeah.
79 or 80, we would have
Four.
built that garage. So,
So, let's see what else we had up here.
Moving along.
Yep. Growing up, I remember the house as being one of order. How did you make that happen?
Which house?
Well, I don't know. It's the question.
anyone. The
21.
White House. Now, we're in the White House now.
Yeah.
Yep.
Well, I didn't work outside the home. I worked inside the home. And after my kids were to school, that was my big project, to have a clean house. And in the morning,
Did you have set chores for all of us?
Yeah, I think we did at that time. But you never did them. You never had to come home and do one after school, because we had music lessons and baseball practices and everything. So it was mostly on chores Saturday. And if you wanted to play with your friends, your chores had to be done by noon. If you chose not to do your beds and clean your room and vacuum your share, you stayed in the house till it was done. You weren't allowed to go anywhere.
when did you guys decide to buy an electric lawnmower?
Electric.
I just remember that as a kid growing up,
Flipping
how
that stupid
annoying it
cord.
was to try and flip the cord.
Yeah, it was.
I think Dad was gone so much that I didn't want to go buy gas and put it in the lawnmower.
Yeah.
So
And
it
I
was just
think with you
convenient.
kids were young enough that we wanted small enough to be able to, for you to be able to use it.
Yep.
So I don't know. It was
And when did you
good
guys?
idea at the time.
I didn't realize you guys were so into camping before. When did you guys first get the camper?
Oh heavens!
Man,
When we lived in Hillspring.
yeah, we used my mom and dad's camper a few times.
That's right.
And took the kids, and camping. Camping was our whole life. Our summers were camping.
Oh yeah, we loved to go camping.
Yeah.
So when did Grandpa give you the gift of the campground?
Oh, Grandpa never did do that. We
Grandpa
did.
Lishman.
I know, but we
Oh, okay.
bought that after he passed away. He had some money in the bank, and that was an inheritance.
Oh.
So that's
And what was it? Coast to Coast? Is that what it was?
yeah.
Well, it was Sunrise Resorts that were affiliated with Coast to Coast.
You know, we just barely got rid of that. That was
Yeah.
a really good investment. That was really good for us because it made us go camping, and we could
Yep.
go. We could go stay in these places, and it wouldn't cost us but $1 a night.
You and Jody got the benefit of that more than Todd and Derry because they were older. You know, by the time
Yep.
that came along, but.
And so growing up, did you spend a lot of time with Todd camping and hunting?
Yes, we did.
What was the first hunting trip you remember with Todd?
My heavens, I don't remember specific.
Todd could tell you.
A specific one. Todd.
Oh, do you
Todd-
remember teaching him how to shoot and him shooting his first deer?
Oh yes, and but what really is an interesting story behind that because I just take him hunting with me and then he'd watch as I'd skin the deer out and and
Did you get that from Alan and Anna, the Campbells? Is that where you're? Because I don't remember. Or did the Tomans? They didn't go hunting.
no, it's just I like to do it. I don't think, but I don't think it was them. It was just me. But when Todd turned 14, he was in junior high, and I'll never forget because Randy Broadhead was a school counselor. Mm-hmm. And he came to me and he said, "You need to have a talk with your son." And I said, "You mean Todd?" He says, "Yeah." I said, "Why?" And he says, "You know what? Because he's really having some struggles right now, and he's afraid to talk to you about it." Mm-hmm. I said, "What?" He says, "Yeah, you need to talk to him." So on a pretext of let's go shoot some gophers, Todd and I went out by Levitt, out past Doug and Barb's place, actually, and we were on a hill shooting gophers, and I just sat him down and I said, "Son, what's wrong?" And finally, he was afraid to talk to me. He was afraid that I'd be mad at him. And he said, "I turned 14, Dad." And I says, "Yeah, but you stopped hunting." And I said, "Just when I could go and hunt with you, you stopped hunting." And I never realized that. And so I made it a point to go with him. I didn't shoot anymore, but I would go with him and he loved to hunt. And but that was a real wake-up call for me because I don't know why suddenly I would stop when.
I think you got probably into more sports, but remember all those trophies. He brought that up too. You know, all the trophies, and he wasn't wasn't a sport.
Well,
he was so small.
Yeah, he was he didn't grow until he got it into grade 12. Actually, is when when he really grew. Well, I built these fireplaces in both homes, in the workman home and in the White House, and I on the side of the fireplaces.
Can you move that mic a little closer?
On the side of the fireplaces, I had these trophy cabinets. I had all my trophies in there, and
I just remember
I was quite proud of those, you know. But I never realized how it would affect my son, because he didn't make the basketball team in high school, you know, he was small and he didn't, and suddenly Derry had grown up and taken over in swimming, where he wasn't winning at swimming because he was so small for his age group. There's kids that were shoulders above him, you know, and yet now Derry was taking over the prowess in the swimming, and so all of those impacted him, and so after that talk, I went down and got rid of all those trophies. I kept the little plaques, you know, that said I did it. So if anybody ever wondered, but I basically chucked everything else.
Yeah, we chucked everything.
Yeah, I had lots of trophies there.
Oh, I remember that trophy cabinet.
Yeah.
There must
I
have
remember
been.
before you got rid of it. I remember you had a lot. I used to play with those trophies sometimes.
Yeah, there was probably
So
20, 30.
those mistakes you make growing up and your expectation, and I don't think that I had expectations to Todd of Todd excelling or anything like that, but inwardly he felt that.
Yeah.
And I said to him that night on that afternoon on that hillside, I said, son, the greatest trophy you could ever give me would be when the bishop calls you and asks you to go on a mission, that you can say, I am worthy to fulfill that mission. And that's what happened, you know. So, and I think it really helped Todd. And he went hunting a lot with Greg Burt. And because Greg liked to hunt, and Greg and I were close. Mm-hmm. And
Greg had more time than
I
you
was
did.
the stake young men's leader. We took him up to Gargantuan Cave one time, and when we finished hiking, I was pooped because we'd hike clear up there and back again in one day. And Todd says, "You mind if I go with Greg and see if we can see anything on the way home?" And I said, "No, go right ahead." So I get home. Mom has a good meal all set for me, and we just sit down to relax. And it's about 9 o'clock. So well, Todd should be home by now.
Yeah.
And then in he comes, blood on his hands. I said, "Oh no, you got something?" "Yeah, I got my first elk, Dad." And he shot an elk. And so what?
Was it an elk?
It was an elk. You know, trust me, I remember it was an elk. And I said, "Well, where is it?" And he says, "That's the problem. It's still out up on the forestry. And we have to go through this guy's land, and we can't go through his land because he's got it posted to do it." So I said, "Well, okay." So we hopped in my truck.
At 9 o'clock at night?
At 9 o'clock at night, we went out, and then it was Will Penny's land, just off the Spread Eagle Road. And
Spread Eagle Road?
Yeah, and there was a wash that where a creek had washed down through. It was dry. And so we said, let's just walk through on this one because that's a wash. That's got to be government.
Yeah.
Nobody can own that. So we justified ourselves. So then we went in, found the elk, and it was just outside his land in the forestry. Mm-hmm. And so we ended up cutting the head off and quartering that thing, and we'd carry it one piece or a couple of pieces, then we'd drop it there. Then we'd go back and get the next piece, bring it down to match. And I don't know what time we got home, but it was in the wee hours of the morning when we finally got home. And Todd was ecstatic, but I was kind of worn out by the time we got back.
Wow. Wow. And so you didn't really try to foster that in Todd? It was just in him? He just loves hunting?
He just loved hunting. No. And then when he got to be 16, and he'd go with his friends, or he'd go with Greg. He went with Greg a lot, and but he could tell you more about that. But I just had got tired of the hunting, and we didn't eat the meat. We didn't care for the meat that much, and so it was just one thing that
it was another away time for me. You'd get home, and then all of a sudden you'd be gone till midnight again. Well, not till dark to hunt, and it was just another.
Now, did you with Todd's swimming? Even now, I think Todd's probably the strongest swimmer in the family. How did you? Was that natural for him too, or is it just because you wanted him to swim? Or
I think with
Well, he
Todd,
started young in the water. He was only 3 weeks old.
when we were in Inglewood Pool and then moved down, and then he didn't have any warm place to be able to swim, so he'd do a little bit in the dam, and we took him to Mara Lake to see Kathy and Danny, and took Grandma and we took the boat even with us. Mm-hmm. And when we were in Mara Lake, and he was only 3 years old at the time, and I was really disappointed because he was so much a water dog when we were in Calgary, but he would hardly even go up past his belly button. I'd have to tease him and take him out further, but I was kind of disappointed in him. And then when we got
Merrill Lake was warm though.
Yeah.
And it was gradual. You went out forever before it got deep.
Yeah.
So it was really little kid friendly.
So anyway, then did we move to Cardston and I supervised the pool then, or I think
yes.
I think that's what it was. And he would start swimming in there, and he was
You'd take him down when you'd have to clean it at night.
Yeah, and let him swim. And he was 5 years old. And we went back out to Hill Spring, to the Waterton Dam, and because we had the boat then by this time, before then, of course, and we'd boat and that, and then Todd's going swimming all through on the dam, and it must be, I would imagine, 3/4 to a mile across.
Yeah.
And he was 5 years old, and he swam across that.
Wow.
We were right along with him in the boat.
Yeah, right alongside him, but he wanted to swim that.
But he never missed a beat.
No,
5 years old, tiny little, and he was tiny for 5. He wasn't a big 5-year-old, but he swam that whole dam by himself. And it was where it was wide. It wasn't where, just at the narrow. It was a wide part of that dam. We were all just shocked.
And he's the one that came up with the idea. I want to try and swim across the dam.
Yeah.
Wow. Now, was that boat big enough to pull people skiing?
My kids learned how to ski behind that boat, and I could ski behind. I could even slalom, but to pull me out of the water, it just didn't have enough zip to do that.
Can you tell us that story about Uncle Daryl or Uncle Cam running behind that boat, wanting to barefoot? That's
in the will be in the reflections part of it, I would imagine. But
well, we're on it. Let's just say it.
Okay, well, we went. Cam and Lonnie got the Apollo boat. They loved that boat. It was powerful, and Cam was a good skier, and he would do the toe trick, and no hands and whatnot, and we went out to Waterton Dam, and Daryl and Ruby and Mom and I and Cam and Lonnie, and he says, I really want to try to barefoot ski. And he said, but I can't seem to make it work. And the boat's fast enough and powerful enough to pull me. He said, but I read that if you get back on the shore and you run along and start the boat and you got the tow rope and you run along the shore and then you get into water and then you plop down on your butt and then it'll pull you up onto your bare feet. So let's do that. Let's try that. So we said, okay. So Daryl was driving the boat, and we went back into a little inlet back in the Waterton Dam. And he gets way back up on shore. We pull the boat right over so we can get out.
How old were you guys?
Oh,
old
heavens.
enough to know better.
That's what I was just going to ask.
He would have been, well, let's see. After Cam and Lonnie came down here, so it would have been late 70s when this happened.
So he's probably mid-30s.
Yeah,
late 30s.
Cam was born in 44. Yeah. So, yeah. So we drop him off, and he's got the tow rope, and I'm getting the tow rope out for him, how much he needs to have, and then he yells, "Hit it!" And so Daryl punches that thing, and he just, the rope gets tight, and he just starts running as hard as he can. And a dam, there's no hard shoreline. It's swampy and mucky, and he suddenly chomp, 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 and did a face plant into that water.
Mud.
And I honestly, he had mud clear up to his knees. I still can visualize that in my mind, that idiot. But he wasn't going to give up. He kept running out there. But he figured after that no, that's not the best way to learn how to barefoot.
I don't. I love when you tell that story because I just can't imagine a time that you
Would laugh as hard in
and
the hole.
want to have a camera.
Oh,
What you would
my
give
God.
absolutely.
to have,
What
that imprinted in your mind.
would we ever?
Oh, that's
And you know
awesome.
what? It didn't seem to me like he let go of the rope any too quick either.
You were there, Mom?
Oh,
yes.
yeah, we were all
All of us
there.
were in the boat with him. And
I love the fact that Uncle Cam and Aunt Lonnie still have that boat.
yeah, and
They
runs
said
like
it.
Yeah.
They said it.
That's
It,
the
it
only good
worked
thing
really
Paul
good in
ever did to
BC.
them in that
Just this
marriage.
last week, they used it.
Yeah. Wow. Okay, so where are we at now? So, Mom, if you could pass on some advice to your children and grandchildren on how to keep a home, what you have here? To have an orderly household, what would it be?
Well, I would think if you make a mess, you clean it up. That's the first rule I'd have. It doesn't matter who's in the kitchen or whatever. If you make the mess, you clean it up. If you make a mess in the living room, you clean it up. If you make a mess in the laundry room and that mess is yours, you clean it up. And we demanded it when the kids were young, and so we never had to fight it. And so it was just natural when you kids made a mess. We'd just say, okay, it's bedtime, but
Yep.
it's before you go to bed. You go to bed with a clean house. You wake up to a clean house, and so
Now,
That's the key right there.
Yeah.
And I honestly, son, I don't believe that in 50 years, approximately 50 years before Mom ever allowed a dirty dish in the sink while we went to bed and retired. And then it wasn't a big mess. It was just we had eaten some popcorn downstairs or something.
Yeah.
Come up and put it in, and we'll clean it up in the morning type
Yeah.
thing.
to me, it's easier to get up and make breakfast if you have a clean kitchen. I can't work in a dirty kitchen. Or
I remember lots of times we were ready to go to bed, but nope, we got to get those dishes washed first.
wow.
Yeah.
and lots of times on a Sunday when we'd have the kids and it was school the next day, or
Yep.
we'd all say, okay, it's school the next day. This house has got to be cleaned. So we'd vacuum, and I can remember lots of times mopping, and you'd vacuum, and we'd do the dishes before. And so then the next morning, all we had to do is empty the dishwasher and go on. But I never allowed it. We started young when you were kids, just 4 and 5 years old. You made a mess, you cleaned it up, and you made a mess in the kitchen, you cleaned it up,
Yeah.
and
Now-
before you went to bed. So we never ever dealt with that ever.
Yeah. A question that I've had, I wonder, growing up in Hill Spring, Dad, you grew up without a father figure, and you grew up with just Grandma Faye, and I can't imagine you guys were terribly religious back then as far as having family home evenings and having family prayer and reading your scriptures with Uncle Barry and you and Grandma. And so then, at what point in your life do you feel like the church when did you become a spiritual giant, as it were, or become
I think when we had kids.
like from the time Todd was born?
Well, you know what, Blaine? I think it was our association with Cam and Lonnie. We saw what they were doing with their kids, and we liked it. We saw, and they were by far the most religious. I mean, Daryl pitched ball on Sunday, and they went to ball games, but Cam and Lonnie never did. I think they were
Yeah, because I even
Pretty
played
ex-
ball on Sunday
example.
a couple of times, and it about forfeited me the right to participate in MN church ball. And so
Yeah.
that cooled that. So then, and that would have been about 1970-ish, I would think, somewhere in there.
But I think
So
that-
even then, I mean, we would always go to church, but nothing
Yeah.
like. And then when family home evening, and I don't know when family home evening was really pushed. I think that's where it started, but I would have to say
Our
that
friends were doing
by
it,
the
and-
time that you came around, we were into family home evening and into scriptures and that. And then once you were 3 years old, it would have been a colossal sin to not have family home evening. You were the one that kept, because you wanted mom's
Gathering.
treats. But every one of my kids took turns
Giving
giving
the
lessons.
lessons.
So it wasn't just Dad that gave the lessons. Every one of the kids. And Mom's journal, Derry gave such a good lesson on something, whatever, and then or Todd taught us about and it was really good. Jody would supply the piano music, and we'd sing, and Mom always had the treat ready. Kids always look forward to that. But we held family home evening probably from
Brandon would never
I
let
would
us.
say the early 70s on. I don't think we ever missed hardly a day.
And you were the big instigator. If something was going to come up on a Monday night, you'd say, you can't do it that night because it's family home evening. You can't do it that night. So you were always the defender of the family.
Now, as far as my testimony in the church, or my dedication to the church, I think would have, and I remember Mom and I went in to see a movie, and it was R-rated. And that time we never even noticed what the rating was.
Yeah.
But we became very, very uncomfortable. There was nudity in the film, and lovemaking in that, and we stayed to the bitter end instead of getting up and leaving.
Were we
And
by
at that
ourselves?
time, yes. And at that time, I don't remember if we were with,
Or were
maybe
with
we were
you
with
for-
somebody else. I don't remember. But at that time, I was serving as a counselor to Wayne Olson in the Stake Sunday School.
Yeah.
And all the way home, I kept thinking, wow, what if Wayne finds out that I was there? That just bothered me, because I really respected Wayne in those days. And it just bothered me so much that I just said, if I'm bothered, if Wayne cares about it, why am I not bothered? The Lord cares about it.
Yeah.
And so we just decided that was enough. And I think from that time on, then I think that probably was the turning point of being really dedicated to the gospel, I think, more than I had been before. Before that, I was, I there, but I wasn't there. I mean, I served as a young men's president, in the state callings, served on state high council, and all of those things, but I really didn't have that testimony of what I needed to be doing until then.
Well, and it's interesting because I've never really thought about how much of my own style of parenting or my own idea of how to be a father was instilled because of the way I was raised and the example that I had in you. And I wonder, when you became a father, was there a time that you doubted yourself because you didn't have that role model, or you weren't quite sure how to handle? Because where did you get your example from? If you just had Grandma Faye.
I had Grandpa Tolman, and family was all the family around and everything. I don't know, son. I just think Grandma Faye gave that basic foundation of parenting that I followed. Mm-hmm. I think Mom was strict with us, even though people didn't think that was the case. She was, and we got our share of whippings because we didn't follow through on assignments that we were supposed to have gotten done. Mm-hmm. And she finally gave that up, though, when she came home, and Barry and I knew we were going to get whipped, and we got a great big tree branch. Brought it in, and we had it sit in the shoe. What's this? And we didn't get the job done, so we knew we'd get a whipping. She just sat down on that old ugly blue Chesterfield that we had and just started laughing. And pretty soon tears were rolling down her cheek, and I don't think she ever strapped us or whipped us again after that. Not that she whipped us a lot. It was just that we got a good paddle if we didn't do what we were asked to do.
Yeah.
Now, me, on the other hand,
You didn't learn your lesson?
I got strapped more times than
What was it a struggle for you guys to get the kids up in the morning and get scripture study? And it just
Not
seemed like
really.
every day that's what we did.
Not really, because we always had breakfast. So that was the big, and then it was early morning seminary.
Scones.
I don't remember ever having to go in and saying, guys, you got to get up. You got to get up. I just think you knew your dad, and you knew that you better get up. It was just a thing you never argued about. So we'd call you once, or if your alarms went off and you weren't responding, we'd just go down and call you. But we always had breakfast.
Yep.
I'd make great big bowls of bread dough, and we always had scones in the morning. Can you remember that?
Oh, yeah, definitely. Where did that recipe or idea come from? Where'd you learn the scones? And more importantly, the peanut butter and icing sugar.
I don't know where that came from, to tell you the truth.
You were very inventive.
Yeah,
That came from me?
Yes, and
No way.
Yes, it did. And none of my other kids did that. Really, I don't think Todd and Gary did.
We used honey butter a lot,
Yeah.
And you were the one that always had to have a DA-ang stupid seasoning salt on your popcorn. And I'd go down to get your
We'd
popcorn
go
under
to
the bed,
have some of your pop. Oh, yuck!
and it was seasoning salt, and you'd put not just 1 teaspoon, but you'd put 2 teaspoons. There'd be a couple of teaspoons in the bowl at the end of the popcorn night.
Well, I'll tell you who got me into that Lowry seasoning salt was Grandpa LeVar.
Oh, is that right?
Oh, yeah.
We'll blame him.
He would have a 1-gallon bucket of seasoning salt and refill his Lowry seasoning salt. So
Yeah.
he used to make toast with butter and seasoning salt on it. That's where
Really? I didn't know
that's
that.
where I had learned it from. That's where I got my taste for it
But
from.
I think it was you that come up with the icing sugar and peanut butter. I don't think anybody else. You ask anybody else in the country, and they'll say never. We never did that.
And none of your other kids did. I thought everyone did it.
I think Jody did it, but it was just my 2 younger kids, Brandon and
Todd and Derry
Todd
didn't?
and Derry never did that.
Wow. So looking back on your time as a parent, what was your favorite thing about being a parent? Was the best part and the worst part about being a parent?
To have to discipline would be the
Worst part.
to figure out a discipline that would accompany the sin.
I think the best part of being a parent is to gather your children together around the dinner table, because we always wait at the dinner table, and Mom would always have a good meal, and all you kids were right there and joining in with us, and it just warms my heart to think about it,
And that's where our family councils happened. Not necessarily before family home evening. I don't ever remember that. But when we were together at a meal in the evening, I heard about you getting in trouble with the van that hit your teeth and the dog that was barking. That's where, we would discuss those kind of things at the dinner table. But yeah. I think if people, and I know that the culture now it's just not, it doesn't happen. But in our day, you had 3 big meals. You did 3 big meals, and you sat at the dinner table. Mm-hmm. And that's where our family counts. Don't you think, Blaine? I think we discussed a lot.
Oh, I think so.
At the family dinner table.
Well, I think,
and you just didn't get up. You didn't come and just eat and then get up and you take your plate to the dishwasher and leave the table. That didn't happen either. We all sat there and ate and then discussed. And it's like that today. I have all my kids home, and the best discussion is after a Sunday dinner to sit around the Sunday table and discuss stuff at the table.
Yeah.
And I remember my kids getting mad at me because I wanted to clean up and get out of there, but I'm way different than that now. Hey, honey?
Well, I think, yeah. And I think the joy of being a parent comes from seeing their accomplishments. I can pinpoint out and just see how what fulfillment that is, and I guess to see both my sons go on missions, to see them active in the church, and my daughters to marry good men and in the temple, to see them grow from babies to adulthood, and share in the joys, the disappointments,
because even now when my kids hurt, when they're having an argument or there's a disruption in their family, it hurts me just as much as if they were my own kids. You hurt, You cry for them, you feel for them. It doesn't ever go away. But I can remember that the things that Blaine did with Brandon stuck with him. Like I remember Blaine building a little pool, a pond out it wasn't a pond. It was
You mean Todd?
Todd, yeah. A pool in the backyard. It was a rock garden and stuff, and you built that. Well, Todd was right beside him, laying the rocks, putting the cement on, cementing it in, and doing things with him. And that's how Todd learned to do things, because his dad shared it with him. Same with electrical. The reason that Todd knows so much about, well, all you kids, is because your dad.
But you didn't catch it until later. When that question, but when did you get it? Yours came later, I think. Yours was you were more of a social animal than the others.
Yeah.
And so your friends were more important, and you were off doing things with them. Where I think Todd and I had a really close relationship as friends, in addition to being father-son, and so he would go with me, probably over his own friends, and
yeah, if there was a decision that had to be made, if I'd go watch Dad play baseball or if I'd go do something with my friends, he was always kind of choose you over that.
And Derry, she's a very perceptive person, and I remember her having conflict with her mom because her room was messy, and having a difficult time. And I went in there to scold her, and she says, "Don't be angry with me, Dad. Just talk to me." And she taught me a lot about parenting. She's very perceptive.
She thinks before she says to, which is not me. But Derry will think about things and then be quiet about it. And she's another person that does not like to have confrontation. And she will go about it to dissolve it the spiritual way. And Jody's a peacemaker. She didn't like confrontation, but she didn't like us being mad. She didn't like the cousins being mad. She didn't like her siblings being mad. She didn't like her siblings arguing with each other. Jody was just a peacemaker, and she'd do everything just because she wanted to make peace in the family. Now, you were just telling me tonight that she had a barbecue because Melanie and Rusty were in Canada, and she invited the aunts and uncles and everybody. But see, she didn't want to leave anybody out and let them be mad that they didn't get invited. And so she was. I'm surprised she's not Aunt Lonnie's daughter.
Yeah.
Because that's just how Aunt Lonnie wanted everything peaceful, quiet.
I think Cam and Lonnie would like her to be their daughter.
And honestly, Jody will at all costs make sure that peace in the family, to the point where I think sometimes that she should stand up and let him.
Of all of our kids leaving home, Jody's was toughest, because she just filled our home with music.
Yeah.
And that we just missed that music so much, eh, hon?
Yeah.
She was.
Even when she wasn't playing, she was teaching. I remember one year she was taking voice lessons. She was taking organ lessons. She was playing for the ward, and she taught kids in the basement, And it was funny because we had the swimming pool at that time, and if they passed off a lesson, then they could bring a friend and swim in the swimming pool that week. And so there was no end to the list of who wanted to take piano lessons from Jody Bunnage because they got to swim in the pool.
And so she took chording lessons out of Mountain View from Bruce Stratty.
We took her out to Mountain View.
Plus worked.
And then she worked at the drugstore.
Yeah.
And then she was in the plays.
Yeah.
So there would be lots of times that I would go in the bedroom at 1 o'clock in the morning even, and she would have the light on, and she'd be laying on the floor in her bedroom, mind mapping her homework. And so her homework didn't get done until maybe 1 or 2 in the morning, but she never neglected her school. She never neglected her young women's. No. She never neglected her responsibilities at the house. And I let her get away with quite a bit of household chores because she was so busy doing the right kind of things.
Yep.
And so if she was practicing her music, well, then I'd do the dishes that night. Or if she was going to a song practice or whatever, then I'd do. And her and Tracy Atwood sang a lot together. And they did things, church-wise and mutual and stake and that. And so she was a very, very busy girl. So I let her slack off. She didn't really learn how to be domestic or cook until she was in, I would say, Tucson. That's when she learned. And that's why Mexican cooking is her big thing. Because I never made her make bread. I never taught her to do cookies. I never taught her to do anything because her whole life was consumed with music or friends or, all good things.
Yeah. So what would you say if you could go back and talk to your 20-year-old self? What would your advice have been to Sheila Bunnage at age 20 for your future?
I would just say be more patient. Just accept a dirty house. Accept an unclean bed, an unmade bed. Accept those things that really, really didn't matter, but were important to me, but to nobody else.
Do you think that to some degree your relationship with Derry in particular was compromised to some degree because of that inability to forget about the bedroom over?
Yes, absolutely.
Is that a regret that you have in your life?
Yep. And I regret that I never went and tucked my kids in. Like I saw you and Tasha tuck your kids in, and they were 11 years old.
Yeah.
Reading stories, and I would sit there and think, holy crap, he's 10 years old. You don't need to be reading bedtime stories. But I'll tell you, you'll never be sorry that they'll remember that.
Yeah.
For the rest of their lives. But I never was one to go sit and read and tuck them. I'd say prayers and tuck them into bed, but I was never one to read stories and stuff to my kids.
How about you, Dad?
Regrets. First thing I'd say is keep a journal.
Oh, that's interesting.
Yeah, because you only have this one lifetime with them, and to remember, trying to write this book, and remember back, it's so difficult, But thank goodness we've got pictures, even though those pictures aren't great pictures, but with that bright light camera, the movie camera I had, I'm able to get some decent enough that you can tell.
Thank heavens for technology, though, Blaine, because that's really allowed you to clear those up too.
Yeah, that was the first thing. So keep a journal. Second,
keep a journal. Just exactly like Mom said. Be more patient. I think not raise your voice so much. I think that I probably was too much of a dictator when I was.
That was the way back in the day. Everybody disciplined like that,
But every kid is so completely different. And I wonder how much that may have changed or may not have changed relationships with kids, because you guys gave up on the room by the time you got to me.
No,
you didn't. You could have turned my drawers upside down. I'd have said, "All right, who cares?
Yeah,
I guess I'll pick my clothes up off the floor."
Well, I was happy for water beds because you couldn't shove anything underneath them.
Even the seasoning salt. So yeah, I think that's great advice. So what's the favorite trip you ever took on with your kids?
As a kid with me taking our kids. Our kids. I think for you and Jody, it was when we went with Marlene and Gordy to Disneyland. I think that was my favorite trip.
I don't even remember that. How old was I?
Oh my gosh.
He wasn't even around then. It was in 75.
That's why.
Oh.
I didn't know that had happened. I remember the Disneyland trip with Cam and Lonnie. And
yeah, that was fun.
Okay, I think that was with my two older kids. That would be my favorite trip, was Gordy and Marlene.
That's interesting. Why?
Well, Gordy and Marlene had really nothing, but they loved us enough to save enough so that they could be with us to go. And Jody was born because she was the one that says it's today fast Sunday when we didn't eat.
That's why I say 75. It was the year before Brandon was born.
Jody asked that. She was 3.
We hadn't eaten.
3 years old.
She was with Gordy and Marlene.
Yeah, and we'd got up really early in the morning on a Monday or something, or Wednesday, and we were traveling, and the kids hadn't eaten, and she said, is it Fast Sunday today? Can't we eat?
Oh, that's cute. So here's a question. It says, what made you most proud or satisfied about each of your children?
Can you pause it?
Yeah.
Proud of your
Well, I'll let Mom talk. I want to pause it. You can.
I think the thing about Todd, being most proud of him, is he was a Lishman. He was a worker. He never let anything stop him from having money in his pocket. He always had a job. He always worked hard. He always worked hard to earn it. And I was always proud that he could do so many things that young kids couldn't do. Mm-hmm. Like who helps stucco a house, or who else lays rock when they're 8 years old or 10 years old or maybe even 14. I don't know how old he was, but he was a worker, and he learned those really early in his life.
Yeah.
And I always loved Derry. The most thing is she always had good friends. You know, even her friends that were boys were good kids. You know, in fact, all of my kids had really good friends. There were some of yours that were, but anyway, though my kids all had it. But Derry in particular, I would have to say Derry had more good friends that were boys than good friends that were girls. When she was a teenager, I can remember her having a whole house load of kids. Not that she didn't have friends that were girls, mm-hmm. but I really admired that she had a lot of picked really good friends, and her choice of friends were always really, there was no question about the boys that came to the house, because you knew they were good kids. And I think all her life she just practiced good, sensible living church-wise. Mm-hmm. Even when she was just a teenager, she read her scripture, she did preacher scripture, she was always that little...
She's always good at school?
Yep, I never had to hound her. I never had to coax her to do much of anything school-wise. And it's really funny because our kids were always given a car when they were young. Mm-hmm. And it was lots of times my dad that would give them the money to buy it, and then they had to pay him off. Mm-hmm. But it was funny. This one day, Derry Lynn had this little Ford Fiesta, red.
Yep.
And she always drove it to school. But we paid the insurance, but they had to pay for their gas.
Yeah.
And we made sure that they had clean little cars and something to take them to school. Anyway, she came home one day, and she was riding her bike. And I said, Derry, why didn't you take your car to school today? And she says, well, it's out of gas and I have no money, so I rode the bike today. So she's always been kind of frugal that way, mm-hmm. too, you know. She never argued, never questioned, like, oh, Mom, can't you just fill my car? I haven't any money. I promise I'll pay you back. No, she was always frugal with her money, but for some reason she did not have any money that day and rode her bike. Never questioned it. Just went to school, and I was quite surprised when she came home and was on her bike. But that was her answer. Well, I had no money, and I couldn't fill my car, so I rode my bike. Yeah,
that's crazy. It sounds like, of all the time, every time we discuss your kids growing up, like that infamous story of Derry's bedroom with the flipping over of the...
No, she didn't appreciate that.
Oh, no. That's what I mean. It seems like every time I try and dig up dirt on Derry to find out how she was as a kid, I kind of get the same thing. She had great friends. She was always really good in the church. She always got her homework done. She always was industrious. It seems like what I would give to have a kid like that.
But you know
I
what?
would give anything to
but
have
when
a kid
you have
that
a mother,
would get their homework done.
Yeah.
But when you have a mother that has a
obsessive
mental
compulsive disorder.
Yeah.
And
I could not be happy until my house was clean. Once my house was tidy and clean, then I could interact, I could be happy. But if I had things out of place and stuff, that really sent me on I was moody, I was grouchy, I was mean. But as soon as my house, all things fell into place and I was fine. So that's why it was her mom. That's why I said I wished that I could be born without that, just to feel like what it would be like to be a normal mother that can let a mess happen and not get upset or angry or have all this stress built up that you could just, I'd love to have had that.
It seems like a part of that was you finding your place as a mom, too, at that time. You were a young mother. I mean,
Yeah.
at the time Derry was born, you were 20?
Was I even that old? Blaine?
22.
22.
22?
Yeah.
Todd was 5?
Todd was coming. His birthday was coming when Derry was born.
I see. So we were just saying, Dad, what's your... Mom's not done yet. So with Jody, what made you most proud?
I think her musical talent. I think that anytime I could see people that would call her up and ask her to accompany them, that I could see people had a regard for her talent in music. Mm-hmm. I think that Jody was a peacemaker. So if there was anything problem-wise at school, it would be Jody that would be helped to settle it. Any argument at home, it was Jody that was the one that was saying, well, had a reason why how we could fix it.
She's still that way.
Yep. Yeah, she is very much so.
Yeah.
So I think but her musical talent, being able to, and now when I think about it, I don't think Jody, the musical talent is in particular, but what I am so proud of Jody is how she has developed and cared and passed it on to her children for some needy or handicapped child or somebody. Because I have heard her say, when they say to me that you're going to have this next year a real problem child in your grade, you're not going to be happy, it's going to be a challenge, you're going to really have to work hard. Then Jody, in her mind, just says to herself, I've heard her say this, my mind just goes crazy and says, that person is going to know for sure that I love him before he leaves this grade.
Yeah.
But she takes it on as a challenge to make that kid happy in school. And there's been so many instances that the parents have come back to Jody and said that would have never, my kid has never ever developed, or my kid has never been treated that way at school. But Jody just takes it on as, I'm going to make sure that kid knows that I love him. Mm-hmm. I've heard the Pankhursts say, I don't know what we would have ever done this year. They've got a very, very, very high-strung autistic grandson, and Jody has just brought him out of miles and miles. And they said over and over that there's no teacher ever like Jody has been to their kid. And I've heard that over and over from parents who have children who struggle, as well as people that have very smart kids. I've heard them say, well, if it wasn't for Jody Cottle, they wouldn't be like that. Especially in that new math program, I've heard so many parents say, well, put your kid in, you can get them in Jody Cottle's class. They'll never struggle in math again.
That's awesome. All right, what about me?
The thing that I'm most proud about you is how studious you were. You didn't really have to work in high school, but even to the paying off of that. Because I remember when you came to us and said, I want to buy this BMW, I just went berserk. What in the world is he thinking? He's got to be crazy. And I wasn't going to let you do it. And Dad said to me, I remember him coming and saying, Sheila, you've got to leave him, give him some slack, because he's gonna spend his money. He's gonna spend it on music, records. He's gonna spend it on music. Let him have to. And so that's when Dean Gregson gave you.
Yeah.
And he took it off your check.
Yeah.
And he said, we're not going to have to worry about it. He's going to make sure that Dean Gregson gets paid. So he said, let him do it. And then when he gets to go on his mission, when he's going on his mission, he'll sell it. And he'll use that money towards his mission. But if you just let him go, he's not going to have anything saved up.
Yep.
And so I think that was a determining thing. And I appreciated that you always had, now sometimes it wasn't directed in the right way, but I always felt great that you had confidence. Like you had amazing confidence in yourself. Even when you had that altercation with Mark Bennett, you handled it very adult-like. You had the confidence in what you did was right. And even with that Susan
Levitt,
you had the confidence in yourself that
You're a pretty confident little son of a bitch.
But I admired in high school that I never had to worry about grades with you because you were smart, you pulled down great grades. I never worried about, but I loved how you had the confidence to go and do things on your own that other kids at your age would not do. Now, I know that Daryl and Ruby's kids, they always had to find a job for their kids. Daryl and Ruby did. And they didn't have the confidence, and that's what I really appreciated about you is you always dug hard to, get your grades. And then when you went to medical school, I just was sick because I thought, oh man, is he going to be able to endure this? But you just flew through it, and you had the confidence and the foresight to see what you wanted, and you just went for it.
So you doubted me a little bit when I...
Oh, I doubted never that way, but just the financial part, oh my gosh, how is he going to ever pay for this, da-da. So I was really concerned, but so proud of you when you finally put your mind to it and went sailing through that. And
I don't think we ever dreamed that you'd have $1 million house on Lake Ponderai.
Yeah.
Neither did I.
and another thing, Brandon, that I've really appreciated, because I've seen you with your money, and I've seen you be very generous. Now, lots of people who have lots of money, they wouldn't be putting money in a little bank account for their mom and dad, and they wouldn't be putting money in their in-laws for their mom and dad, and they wouldn't. Instead, they buy boats, they buy RVs, they buy quads, they buy timeshares, they buy all these things you never had to do. You never did that. You're pretty frugal now with your money, I think.
Well, I appreciate that vote of confidence. I don't think Dad would agree. And I would agree with Dad. I think I need to tighten it up a little bit more. A good mix, maybe. A good mix of...
But you were never, right from the day one, when you and Tasha built that house, you didn't have to have a doctor's house. That's a pretty modest home you've got in Richland. And I've appreciated that. Nobody would look at your surroundings in the Tri-Cities and your car, maybe your car, but your home and stuff, and say, wow.
Come to Cards and see Dr. Lowe's.
Or walk into your house and look at your surroundings and say, wow, what a doctor's house. They wouldn't. It's just an ordinary, common, wonderful, feel comfortable house.
Well,
place where your kids can come and bring their kids and make a mess, and you don't get upset. And Tasha's the very best mother ever for that. She likes her kids around. They can make a mess. She never gets upset. Now me, when I even go there, I say, all right, you Bunnage kids, get out of my kitchen. If I'm working here, get out of my kitchen. And it's not even my house. But Tasha would never do that.
No.
So I've appreciated how frugal you are with your money as being a doctor, and I've really appreciated your confidence. And I've appreciated how you can express yourself. Like even watching these back and forth on the Facebook, and how you can express yourself to other doctors, and you're not afraid to do it, and express yourself. I'm really proud of that I've got a son that can absolutely stand his ground and back it up by science or medicine, and I've been damn proud.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that. Well, Dad, how about you? What's something proud about each kid? Start with Todd, and then...
I think I have to do them all collectively first.
Yeah.
I have so appreciated the fact that none of my kids are afraid to get out and work. They've all had jobs. They've just done so many good things, and I just really, really love that about them.
Never ever any drinking or drugs or smoking or
Their industry is just well how we perceive in our own selves, and they've followed things. So that collectively, that's my biggest pride moment, I think, with my kids. With Todd, probably exemplifies that thing I just said more than any of my other kids. I so appreciate the fact that he never worried about Todd, because if this job didn't turn out, then he'd go find another one. It didn't matter what the job was. It could be driving truck, it could be hauling bales, it could be selling cars, it could be selling electronics. It didn't matter. But he would always find work to do, and so that industry in Todd is, in my mind, unexcelled in my children. And
even during COVID, he found some way to make a little bit of money to
absolutely.
pay for the groceries and their bills.
And I guess the other thing I like that I really appreciate about Todd is that his relationship with his mother. He always is concerned about her, talks to her, and so on, and expresses love to her. And I really appreciate the fact that he respects his mom. That's a very important thing. I think. I've loved the fact that he's been by my side with building projects, invited me to come with him on his building projects, including me on a lot of his ideas, and that he's valued my opinion.
The thing that's cool about Todd, is he afraid to try anything?
No, he's not.
There's nothing that intimidates him.
It's
like,
really,
I can do that. Let me look it up, and I'll figure out how to do it. If I don't know how, I'll figure out.
He was so busy, so busy a month ago, working with that thing, but he still found time to go put on your rotors or whatever
and
for your car.
brake pads in my truck.
We could bring it.
Yeah.
Didn't want to send Taylor down here, without having those brakes.
Yes.
Grayson's Taylor was driving our truck down, and he didn't want him to come in a truck that wasn't right up to.
I'm really proud of his ability to swim. He is a really good swimmer. He's got a breaststroke, especially, that I just covet. I try to do the kick, and I can go nowhere. Todd just motors through, and
I remember in Palm Springs, when we were at the pool late at night, he would, do the he'd do the butterfly, and people in the pool would just like, oh, whoa.
Boy, that's
Because
really, really hard.
And he'd do the whole length and back at his age.
Yep.
And our friends would just say, wow.
it seems to me, as a dad anyway, that if there's some event or something that he'd like to go see, I think his first thought would be, I'll see if Dad wants to go.
Yeah.
And he took me to the Masters, which was an unbelievable thing, and he could have passed that on. It was just a pass by that completely. But I'll never forget the phone call. Dad, what's the most important sporting event you'd ever like to go to? And when I couldn't get it out what it was, I thought the Yankees in the World Series. Oh, even better than that. And then finally he told me that he had tickets to the Masters, and we went to the Masters, and that was just an unbelievable trip that we had together.
Yeah.
And then a drive. The guy can drive forever.
Yeah.
I just can't believe that he can stay awake and drive like he does. But we drove all the way from New Orleans, clear back home, and I was going to share driving with him. No, he drove the whole way, and I was quite happy to let him do it.
Oh, what time is it, Brandon?
So I guess his I'm particularly pleased with his willingness to involve his parents.
Yeah.
And love his parents. Derry Lynn, I and all my kids from Todd, from Derry down, owe their success in learning to Derry. Somehow she caught that magical need to study, to excel in school. Todd didn't want to get into the books. That wasn't him.
Yeah.
But Derry did. And somehow she instilled that in Jody, and then Jody into you. And so I think Derry's the one that was the catalyst for all of you guys to be successful in your schooling. Maybe I'm giving her more credit than she deserves. She probably will say I am, but I don't believe so. I think that and I never at any time did I ever feel like I was not loved and supported totally by my daughter. She and I had a wonderful relationship growing up, and I think, of course, I think I had a good relationship with all my kids, but Derry, who struggled some with Mom because of that cleanliness OCD thing that got in the way, that her friends were. She was embarrassed when she came home and then that incident occurred, and I didn't blame her. And I know that I was always accused of taking Derry's side in things, but I just felt that she was very perceptive, and there was more to her than just having to have a clean room. You know?
Yeah.
And of course her artwork. I just absolutely thrilled with her artwork, and now particularly to see that she is a wonderful mother. She's active in the church, has probably the strongest in the church of any of my kids.
She probably knows the scriptures better than any of us.
Oh, yeah. And so...
Do you have a kid with more humility
No.
than Derry?
I don't know. Jody's just as much, you know.
Yeah, the thing that's crazy to me about Derry is that I don't know anything she sucks at.
No.
She's good at everything she does, but
very
she
competent.
won't
Very
take
competent.
she won't take a compliment from anybody.
No.
She's the most gifted artist I've ever seen. There's nothing she can't draw, sketch, paint, any
know.
medium, and now even on Adobe and using an iPad to create art.
Yeah.
And you give her some praise and she can't take it. It's just it's odd to me that she doesn't realize how talented she is. Not only that, Derry's really gifted musically. Yeah. She can sing just as good as Jody can. She can harmonize just like Jody can, but she won't take a compliment. She won't come out of the shadows and say, yeah, I'm actually. So I think that, when Mom's saying that I had the confidence, I wish I could take away half of mine, because I think I have too much, and give it to Derry so that she could.
Yeah. Oh. No, Derry was a sweetheart. I think we just really had wonderful times together, and she's very intelligent. Could give very good advice, and
she thinks
very loyal
through.
to her friends. But all my kids were. But I think probably the friendships with her girlfriends, Gail and Darcy, and those kids she was very loyal and still maintains that. So
yeah, that's why I wondered when we were talking a little bit earlier about you disciplining Jody and raising your voice, and she would cry. I think that. It seems to me, and I was the youngest kid, but Derry was then, and she remains this way now. Just like you said, well, I don't remember how you worded it. Derry is very perceptive to the emotions that are around her, and I think they deeply affect Derry in a way that is not like that for me, or for Todd, or even for Jody. Yeah. Jody is affected, but I think Jody can shake it off and move on more quickly. But I think when Derry, she's so perceptive to other people's needs and other people's emotions that I think when, if Mom dumped out drawers and she was mad at this certain instance, Derry took that far more personally than most kids would, And as a parent, you never know. Like, I look at the things that I've made mistakes with my own children and wish that I could have done differently, but you never really know until your kid gets older. Then the stories come out and you say, oh, that actually was something that meant more to me or hurt me more than you remember as a parent, or you saying this or doing that, You
know what? Something hasn't come up in this conversation about those girls is I have never, ever, ever seen two more compassionate people than Derry and Jody. When anything happens in the ward, anything happens in the church, anything happens at school, it's a letter, it's a card, It's a fool, a meal. It's a book that represents what they're. If there's grief, Jody will go buy a book and a note and give it to somebody who's grieving, and Derry does the same. I've never seen two more compassionate, and it's just a gift with them. Now, I think that I have been blessed a little bit with some compassion for others, but my mom was personification for that. She wasn't an outgoing, speak in public, do everything, but my mom was compassionate. When something happened in the ward, anything that happened in the community, my mom would be very first one there with the meal, a loaf of bread.
As long as the square dancing wasn't on.
Right? Exactly.
But so I think it's kind of been passed down, but it's just an innate trait that's a talent.
Yep.
But I honestly have never seen anybody better than Jody. And for people that are out of the church, I've seen Derry take many meals and bread to people who aren't, and meals and cards to people who aren't even LDS.
Well,
more so sometimes.
The other thing I really like about my kids is, and I think we asked them to do this when they were little, and they grew up having an appreciation for older people and saying please and thank you. And I've really appreciated that in my kids, because they'll not pass by an older person that's in the ward without saying hello or greeting them or whatever. And I think Todd led the way in that. He was just excellent.
He was,
wasn't
and he still is, leads the way as far as family that we don't really have much to do with anymore. Like anybody that comes on Facebook, you watch. If somebody...
Birthday.
It's a happy birthday or... God bless you. Make sure that you're feeling better about yourself. Todd is the first one. You watch on Facebook, and he's the first one to always wish somebody an anniversary, a happy birthday. And it doesn't matter. I saw him post on Terry and Rhonda's posts on their anniversary, on their birthdays.
Sure.
Happy birthday, cuz. And even on the other side, on the card side, remember how he put all those baseball teams together so that they could play on Heritage Days. It was Todd that organized that. It was Todd that bought the bats. It was Todd that bought the bases. It was Todd that bought all the equipment, and then just had family play. I mean, Todd is a very family. It doesn't matter if it's on the Bunnage or the Tolman or the Lishman.
Yeah, he's been really good at that.
He is
really
excellent
appreciate
about
that
trying
in
to
him.
keep.
Just like his property in Kalispell.
Yeah.
There's not a lot of people who would have a property like that and say, here's what I'd like. Why don't you bring your trailer down, park it here forever. You bring your trailer down, park it here forever.
And not charge us anything.
No. And it's a place for everybody to come and gather and not pay a penny.
Yeah.
Well, I guess he's passed that on to you, right, son?
Yeah.
I hope I get 5 years here.
That's true. So where were you at, Dad?
Okay.
Pride.
I'm ready for Jody.
Yeah.
Jody, what can I say about Jode? She just filled our home with music and love, and just so, I don't know, so she was so motherly towards you that she just, there was just, I don't think that there was never an unhappy moment in my life when I think about Jody. She just filled my...
What was the name of that guy?
She just filled me with light, you know.
Yeah.
Had that ability too, and I so appreciated her willingness to participate in the fine arts, you know, where I was over the community theater for all those years, and Derry was in it, and Jody was in it, and
Blaine, what was the guy that Jody and Brent took in off the street, and she
Justin Baker.
Justin.
had him for
Baker.
Christmas, bought him birthday cards, made him birthday cakes, took her in his home when he was sick and he was throwing up and had cancer, and she kept him. I couldn't have done that.
Yeah, he was the Argentinian, right?
I'm
just joking. He said he was
Peruvian.
from Argentina.
We're not sure on that, but Mom said my feelings as far as our Jody is concerned, and with all my kids, as I said before, it was tougher to see her go because of that music. That just was such an excitement in our lives. And that's why I guess it's so exciting to have you share your music now with us.
Oh my
And
gosh.
Max,
It's the exact same way.
yeah.
Tash and I have discussed that. It's going to be heartbreaking when he leaves our home
Oh.
because the music will end.
Yeah.
Like
The day the music died.
There's just something to be said about that. There's some peace and something heartwarming about having a quiet house and then you hear a piano playing.
Yeah.
You know?
I could always tell when Jody was mad because when she'd come home, she'd pound the piano. When she was frustrated, when she'd come home and she was happy, it was a light practice.
I don't think I've ever seen my sister mad. Not what I consider mad. I've seen Jody a little bit upset.
Yeah.
But I've never seen her mad. Not by a scale of my anger. Where my resting emotional level is, that's Jody's angriest.
Well,
That's like where I idle.
that's the Harker in her.
But she has confidence.
Yeah.
And I don't know another Relief Society president that would have taken Keith Olson to task like she did.
She did. Everybody in Glenwood was scared to death of him.
That's
That boy,
scared to death, but he wasn't fulfilling his responsibility
as a grandfather.
as a grandfather, her
The
father.
Remember the divorce happened
Yeah.
between her son
And the child
their
was,
son?
and so she went right down,
I
ran
don't care
up
what
to
your
their
son-
place.
I don't care what the daughter did. These are your grandkids, and you have the responsibility.
Oh,
Wow.
wow. She just bit right
was
on the
telling-
head, I'll tell you.
Telling Cam and Lonnie about it, and they just about
Yeah.
fell through the floor.
Because they would have been afraid to do that. But anyway, that's our Jode. I love her to death. Now, you, I really, I think I'm the most proud, of course, of all the accomplishments you've made scholastically in your life. But, I think the thing I love most about you, son, is your humor, your ability to, the quick comebacks like that. You and Todd imitating the Monty Python things, and I mean, you just filled our home with laughter. I mean, it was just
When Todd
fun to be with you.
When Brandon was coming home for Christmas, everybody wanted to know when's Brandon
when
coming?
Brandon
When's Brandon coming? Grayson included, Taylor included. It was Ben. Everybody. When Brandon's home, they all want to be gathered around Brandon, and it's because of your humor. That's exactly right. You could always make people feel comfortable in a bad situation
Yeah.
because of your humor. But
So of course, the pride in what you've been able to accomplish scholastically is probably the key. But you are just fun to be with.
Oh, thanks.
Growing up, and I just wish that you had kicked your friends away and spent more time growing up.
you know what, though, Blaine? He's musical taught. We didn't teach him that.
I know. Remember you coming back from your mission saying, "Why didn't you guys make me stick at the piano?"
Oh, yeah, I've tried to tell my son that over and over. That's the number one regret of my entire life.
Absolutely.
Biggest regret I have is that I didn't learn to read music and play piano.
But you know what? I was tired out. And when I come to
It's
you,
not your fault.
You were
I
you
was-
were the caboose, and so
I was tired of sitting at the piano. I was tired
Mom,
of
you
arguing.
gave up on every principle that you raised all your other children on. I was the straw that broke the camel's back. You didn't care about my room anymore. You
But
didn't
you know what, Brandon?
care about music.
Dad
Well-
and I have both said lately, honestly, your voice from when you came home off your mission to now is astounding us. The clarity, your
range.
you can hear a note off, you can hear the piano untuned, you can hear a guitar untuned. Brandon, Max doesn't come by that just naturally. I don't think. I think that's a gift and a talent that you've been given, and you've developed that on your own.
Yeah.
And after you
I think
were-
the first clue we really had was when you sent us that, and I don't know where that tape ever got to.
Oh,
was
right.
when you sang "Near My God to Thee" in that cathedral in
It was
France.
with Adam Van Orman, who's from Raymond. I think he lives in Raymond again now, maybe. I can't remember the other. It might have been Elder Matungi, but there was three of us, and we sang in a Catholic church
that
in.
was
I
unbelievable.
think it was in Marseille.
Wouldn't you love to go back and have a digital?
Oh,
rendition?
even the tape. I wish I had the tape.
Yeah, and
We had
I've
that.
looked and looked and looked, and I cannot find
had
that
that.
tape anyplace. Just biggest regret. One of the biggest regrets I've got.
It was
Well,
on a cassette
even now,
tape.
I can hear harmonies when I'm off, and I can tell when But Jody is astounding. Like when we're sitting in church together, she can pick any part and sing it.
Yeah.
She can just read the note.
Yeah.
I'm guessing. Well, it looks like it's about 2.5 steps up. I guess I'll find it. I'll kind of just mess around. But Jody definitely has a gift, and it's that ear of reading music and playing music and knowing how many steps it is and feeling that jump. That only comes from the hard work she put in to get there.
But
Where I have a son that doesn't have to do any work to find it.
He will.
Yeah.
But you know what, Jody? I think that one year we took her out to Mountain View to take chording was the best thing we ever did.
Courting?
Yeah.
Yeah, she learned chords, and
Instead of
that's all she did.
Just the theory,
Theory
of
of
music.
chords.
She just learned how to do chords on the piano.
Interesting.
And
Took her out.
transpose.
So
and
what was her name? Mrs. Stratty.
I had her, Ruth Stratty. I had her when we got home from our trip across the United States.
Yep.
I had her play the musics from A Poor Wayfarer Man of Grief when we were in Carthage and
Yeah.
Come Ye Saints, and she'd just chord that thing, and
It wasn't just out of
beautiful.
the hymn book. It was chording all the way down
Yep.
and up the scale too. But I think that was the best thing we ever did.
Now, all of our kids are very musical. Todd's got a nice voice,
Mm-hmm.
but he just has never developed or sung in the choir or anything like that.
Well,
but when I sing, I sit by him in a church meeting, and he'll sing, and I'll sing bass, and he'll sing bass with me.
Yeah.
He's got a very nice
definitely.
voice, and
Don't you
Derry's
think
got a beautiful alto voice.
Yeah.
And
Do you
so
think they're
is-
in Brandon's limelight and Jody's limelight, so they don't like to?
I think so. I think probably that would have been, but I guess we just are.
A
proud of-
talent from the Tolman family, I think.
Yeah. Now, if you could, I'm just trying to look at here and see which questions to
Yeah,
skip.
wrap it up.
Whoa. What is different about your home now?
Yeah, we don't need to answer those. This is the
Yeah.
way to stop.
But if you could, the one question I did want to ask, and because we haven't even got to grandchildren yet, we'll have to do that at another time. If you could, what would be your legacy that you would want your children and your friends to say about you if someone said, "Hey, do you know Blaine Bunnage?" Yeah. What do you think about him? What would you want that person? What would be?
I know what I'd want them to think about me or us. Boy, were they ever family people. They loved to be with family. That was their whole life, is just to be around their kids and be around family. Because we, outside of our family, we don't have a lot of great friends that we could go do things with, but it's just been, and I've heard other people say that about us. Like when I was having that discussion with Kelly about Kathy and, the situation, he said, my mom has always been jealous of your family connectiveness. Like, you'd always have every one of your kids back. Nobody's going to ever cross a family member in front of you. And that's exactly right. I just think, and it's that Tolman gene. Because it didn't come from my dad and mom. But
Pull the
I
mic a little
think-
closer, Mom.
I just think that's would be mine. Is boy, did they ever do and love their family? Wouldn't you?
Now that's interesting. So that's what Mom's answer was. I'd like to hear your answer of what you think people would say of your wife. People said, "Do you know Sheila Bunnage? What do you think of her? Do you think it would be people would say she really likes to hang out with family?"
No.
Me neither.
they would say probably one of the best homemakers there is and that they've ever run across, and very compassionate person. I think that's Mom's legacy, even more so than family, although family being very,
Yeah.
very important.
I've just never seen anybody who lives, and really it's really just the kitchen. I mean, that's your forte. But I've never, even this morning when Max, before we started today, it was like you couldn't get comfortable doing this interview until Max had been fed and he'd had his food, and you almost wanted to get up and go cook him breakfast. This will just take a few minutes, and then now, for the past hour, all you've been doing is thinking about dinner. So I think that's a rare trait that you just live to make sure people are comfortable and fed. That's what I would say your legacy would be.
I'd agree with that. And I would also say that not only is she sweet inside, but outside, she's a very attractive person. For 75 years old, 76 years old, she's
don't
pretty
say that
darn,
today.
coming 76. She's a pretty darn good-looking woman. Held her age very well.
Yep. Now, what about you, Dad? What would you hope your legacy would be?
I hope people would think that I was a good teacher, a good administrator, able to organize and conduct things like that.
Your staff would all agree with that. Best
Pardon me?
principal. Your staff that you had that was so good, they'd always say that. Best principal I ever worked for. They'd all say that.
So the follow-up question to that is, now I want to switch that a little bit to ask the question, what do you hope your children would say your legacy is? My mom. Tell me something about your mom.
You'd hope that they would say?
Yeah. What would you hope? What do you think your children would say if they said, describe your mom. Tell me about your mom.
Well, I would hope, I don't know if they would, but I would hope they would say that there was no better nurturer than my mom. Because I don't know where, if I've got it from my mom or whatever, but I don't think that it's 10 minutes into the house, whether it's Bernie and Derry, whether it's Ben, whether it's Matthew, whether it's Max, any of them come in, I'm just always saying, even Todd, when he had come over to work in the mornings, Todd, have you had breakfast? No. Well, what would you like? And it was just, I would say that I was a nurturer. I would hope that they would just say, boy, my mom was the best nurturer. Like, they're not going to come and say that she was the best, the most patient mother. She was the most religious mother. She could do public speaking, all those kinds of things that I wished I had. But I would hope that they would say she had the most nurturing spirit. Because I do. I just, and I know our grocery bill's still high, but it's just because I want things on hand when they do come. It's crazy.
Yep. How about you, Dad?
I think Derry paid me one of the best compliments. She had a picture of me for Father's Day sometime in Facebook, and she said, "Does he ever not have a twinkle in his eye?" And I think that I hope my kids would think that I was a positive person, and looked on the good side of life and didn't get down a lot.
Yeah, I would say that's probably accurate. Now, the last part of this, the last question I wanted to ask Mom is, what would you want your kids to know that you think they might not know?
They might not know. Each one individually?
Sure. Or collectively, either one.
Collectively, they might not know about Mom, but she'd like them. She wished they knew.
Or something like for example, Bella might not know that I'm really proud of her for reading books. She likes to read books, and I don't know if I've told her that, but it does make me really proud. What is something you'd like your kids to know that they might not know? They might not have ever heard you say.
Oh, I see what you're saying.
Something you may not have ever expressed to your kids that you wish you had.
Do Dad first.
Okay. Yeah, because I sprung this one on you. You can take some time. I can edit this,
Yeah.
the deliberation part out.
Well, that's a difficult question.
What do I want my
'Cause
kids to know that they might not
I,
know?
that they might not know about me. That's easier to answer.
Yeah.
But what that I want them to know that about them.
Or maybe that's just too tricky. I don't know.
I guess probably that I consider them to be my best friends, aside from their mom. In addition to their mom, that there's no place I'd like to be more than with my own children. I think they probably know that, but maybe not. But if they don't, that's what I want them to know, because I love them all so much.
And I hate to go back on things, but I want Brandon and Tasha to know that there is nobody in this world that's more giving to the outside underdog than you guys. I think of you taking in those two
Exchange students.
and what you did for them, how you've impacted their lives, and what you did for that young girl that was abused in her home and you had to call the police. I don't think there's anybody that could do that, especially a wife. The husband's not there all the time, but Tasha is the most, she's like her dad a lot, for sure. She is the most giving and always wants to do something for nothing for somebody else.
Yeah.
She is extraordinary about that. I have to say, Tasha, and you are the most, it's compassion, yes, but you have a feel for somebody less privileged, and you take it on and are not afraid to do it. I've watched you with your friends here. I've watched you with your exchange students. I've watched you with kids in your home. Even those young men that came with Max the other night and stayed the weekend. I saw how you took those, and were they a little nerdy?
Yeah, they definitely were a little.
But you oversaw that, took them out on the deck, talked to them, made them feel comfortable in your home, until the time came they wanted to stay another day. And I don't think you guys realize that is a trait that you might not realize that you have, but you have a real gift for giving people, making people feel comfortable in your home, whether it's a 10 or 11-year-old or whether it's a 80-year-old.
Yeah.
And Tasha's like that too. You both have that it's a desire, but you both have that talent to make people feel welcome and comfortable in your home. So
Well, that's very kind of you to say. I think
that's one thing that I would want you to know that maybe you didn't know that I thought of you.
Well, it's interesting because over the past 12 hours of doing this and interviewing and talking about stuff, do you see a recurring theme? Last night, you talked about your mother spending her days not knowing who was going to come through that door, but it didn't matter who it was.
Yeah.
They were going to get treated like family. You talked about Grandma Faye just having those big arms and giving those big hugs and just making everyone feel loved and sticking up for everybody. You guys have had a home like that where that's your constant thing, is making sure that people are fed and comfortable in your home. Todd has a property down in the States that's for everybody else. Derry and Bernie have a home that's been open to everybody forever, and everybody's always welcome. Jody and Brent have brought in, doesn't matter who it is or how they got there, everyone's always welcome in their home. And Tash and I do the same, and I think there's something to be said about legacy and about family. That Tash and I didn't just get that way by chance. It's because that's the way you raised me, and that's the way Joe raised her.